On the morning of September 12, 1974, the long reign of Emperor Haile Selassie I, also known as the Lion of Judah, came to a sudden and humiliating end in Addis Ababa. For months, Ethiopia had been rocked by unrest. Workers went on strike, students protested, and the military mutinied, and public anger over corruption and famine was mounting. By this time, a newly formed military council, known as the Derg, had already stripped Selassie of most of his authority, arresting ministers and key officials. At dawn, soldiers surrounded the Jubilee Palace, the emperor's residence. Frail and in his 80s, Haile Selassie was informed that he was no longer the ruler of Ethiopia. There was no ceremony, no official abdication, only armed men delivering the news. His loyal guards and aides were dismissed, and he was escorted from the palace. The scene was striking. The man who had once symbolized African sovereignty and commanded global respect was now seated in the back of a modest blue Volkswagen Beetle, a far cry from the grand limousines that had once carried him through triumphant processions. Crowds watched silently as soldiers drove him through the streets of Addis Ababa. Some onlookers were in shock, others in disbelief or bitterness. Children peered curiously, while elders shook their heads, mourning the collapse of centuries of tradition. Haile Selassie was taken to the Menelik Palace, now under Derg control, where he would be placed under house arrest. The monarchy was abolished, and Ethiopia was declared a republic. In a single day, centuries of Solomonic rule came to an end. The fall of Haile Selassie marked not only the end of a monarchy, but also the beginning of a turbulent and violent chapter in Ethiopian history. All of this unfolded as a result of a single critical mistake he made during his reign, which we will explore below. Haile Selassie was born as Lij Tafari Makonnen on July 23, 1892, in the village of Ajersagoro in the Harar province. Emerging from the noble Shiwan aristocracy as the son of Ras Makonnen Voldemikael, a trusted general and cousin of Emperor Menelik II, he was instilled with discipline, loyalty, and a vision for Ethiopia's survival in a changing world. From a young age, Tafari displayed extraordinary intelligence. He received an education uncommon for Ethiopian nobles, learning traditional religious texts alongside French and modern subjects. This combination of heritage and modern knowledge positioned him as a bridge between Ethiopia's past and its evolving future. His political career began in his teens when Emperor Menelik II appointed him to minor administrative roles. After his father's death in 1906, Tafari steadily rose through the ranks, becoming governor of Sidamo at age 13 and later governor of Harar, a critical region for politics and trade. His fairness, efficiency, and reform-oriented mindset earned him respect from commoners and elites alike. However, the Ethiopian aristocracy was deeply divided. Tafari had to navigate court intrigue, rivalries, and suspicion while steadily consolidating his power. After Menelik II's death in 1913, a succession crisis placed Menelik's grandson, Lij Iyasu, on the throne. Iyasu's controversial rule alienated the Christian nobility, and in 1916 he was deposed. Empress Zewditu ascended, and Tafari was made regent and heir apparent, effectively running the government while she served as a symbolic monarch. During this period, Tafari introduced modest reforms that aimed to modernize the administration and improve the lives of ordinary Ethiopians. Yet, he carefully balanced tradition with change, aware that Ethiopia's elite remained suspicious of any threat to their privileges. Between 1916 and 1930, Tafari strengthened his position by championing modernization, pursuing foreign alliances and expanding Ethiopia's diplomatic presence. In 1923, he played a key role in Ethiopia joining the League of Nations, affirming the country's sovereignty on the global stage and boosting his image as a progressive leader. When Empress Zewde II died in 1930, Tafari was crowned Emperor Haile Selassie I on November 2nd, taking the title meaning Power of the Trinity. His coronation was an international event, signaling Ethiopia's emergence as both an ancient kingdom and a nation looking toward modern governance. The emperor's arrival at the grand ceremony, clad in robes adorned with gold and jewels, symbolized centuries of continuity, yet heralded a new era of reform and engagement with the modern world. Haile Selassie introduced significant reforms early in his reign. In 1931, he enacted Ethiopia's first written constitution, limiting the monarchy's absolute power and creating a framework for parliamentary governance. He promoted infrastructure development, education, and centralization of state authority while reducing the influence of regional nobles. But in 1935, Ethiopia faced its greatest challenge when fascist Italy, led by Mussolini, invaded. Despite brave resistance, the Italians, with superior military technology, overwhelmed Ethiopian forces. Haile Selassie fled to Britain in 1936, delivering a famous speech at the League of Nations warning that aggression anywhere threatened the world. His words, initially met with limited response, proved prescient as World War II unfolded. In exile, Selassie lobbied tirelessly for his country's liberation. By 1941, with the support of Allied forces, he returned triumphantly, reclaiming the throne and restoring Ethiopian independence. Post-war, he continued efforts to modernize the nation, expanding education, healthcare, infrastructure, and advocating for African unity through the founding of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. Despite his international prestige, Haile Selassie faced increasing domestic difficulties. Ethiopia remained largely feudal, with widespread poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment in rural areas. Famines in the late 1960s and early 1970s, particularly the devastating warlord famine, exposed the regime's weaknesses. Meanwhile, the royal court maintained an extravagant lifestyle, creating a stark contrast with the suffering population. This growing disconnect fueled protests by students, workers, and intellectuals. The emperor's failure to address the famine and social inequality, coupled with his adherence to monarchical tradition, alienated the younger generation and the military. By 1974, the Derg capitalized on this public anger, portraying themselves as defenders of the people. When they deposed Haile Selassie, resistance was minimal. The famine, in particular, became a symbol of governmental negligence. Reports of starving families and abandoned villages circulated, igniting outrage among university students and journalists. Many Ethiopians who had once revered Selassie now questioned whether the monarchy truly represented their interests. The single greatest mistake of Haile Selassie's reign was not military defeat or political intrigue. It was his inability to respond adequately to the suffering of his people. Reports of famine were ignored or suppressed, while the imperial court remained focused on opulence and ceremonial grandeur. This indifference eroded the legitimacy of a throne that had stood for centuries, leaving the emperor vulnerable to revolt. By underestimating the urgency of social and economic crises, Haile Selassie transformed from a symbol of African independence into a monarch remembered for failing his people during their darkest hour. Historians note that his advisors repeatedly warned him about the growing unrest, yet the emperor continued to prioritize international prestige and ceremonial duties over domestic reform. This disconnect ultimately allowed the Derg to position themselves as saviors of the Ethiopian people. After his deposition, Haile Selassie was placed under house arrest. On August 27, 1975, he died under suspicious circumstances, officially attributed to natural causes, though many historians believe he was murdered by the Derg. His burial was secret, and only decades later, in 2000, were he given a proper state funeral in Addis Ababa. Haile Selassie's legacy remains complex. Internationally, he is remembered as a visionary leader and advocate for African unity. Domestically, his reign was marked by modernization, but also by social failures. He is revered by the Rastafari movement as a messianic figure, ensuring that his memory extends far beyond Ethiopia. His life serves as a cautionary tale. Even the most celebrated leaders can lose their throne when the needs of the people are neglected. Haile Selassie's story demonstrates that power, prestige, and tradition cannot replace empathy, vigilance, and responsiveness to the suffering of those one is entrusted to lead.